Welcome back. You're watching Paul Murray Live, and I'm going to take your calls in just a minute. 1300 30 34 35 with a crackerjack panel. But before we get to them, we've got to abandon Fortress Australia at some point. Well, they're the words of Victorian Chief Health Officer Brett Sutton. And he's right. We've got Victorian and New South Wales premiers wanting vaccine targets linked to borders reopening. They're insisting the federal government actually spell out how inoculation relates to the reopening of international borders. And here's the deal. Having the international border open won't do much for your economy if your power-mad premier has your state in a lockdown. The states need to get their houses in order, and they need to stop deflecting blame to the feds. Because if opening the borders is going to achieve anything, that has to be done. Now, to discuss this, I'm joined by Victorian Liberal Democrat MP David Limbrick. David, thanks for your time tonight. Tell me, how important is the predictability of the response of state premiers to future COVID outbreaks?
Well, it's absolutely essential, but going by, past history, we know what's going to happen. We'll get 2 cases and there'll be a lockdown. I mean, it's a bit rich for people to say, all of a sudden they're worried about borders. I mean, over the last year, we've had this sort of lockdown cult, which has had a border around our state, a border around our cities, a border around our postcodes, a border around our house, and a border around our mouth. And now all of a sudden, when international borders are an issue, they're saying, oh, well, this is a problem now. And people are saying, it's breaching Article 13 of the UN Declaration on Human Rights. Well, we've had human rights problems the whole time throughout the pandemic. And then when people ask questions like I've been asking, they come back and say, well, that's executive privilege and the human rights assessments are all secret. You're not allowed to see it. I mean, this is just crazy what they're doing here.
But what's extraordinary, David, is that, and I made this point earlier in the evening tonight, state premiers are being rewarded for these over-the-top responses. It seems that the more powerful they are, the more they oppress the citizenry, the more people want to vote for them. Why is that the case?
Look, there's a lot of people that think, they want to be safe, I suppose. But the question really isn't, whether the response is working. The question is the response proportionate to the risk that we've got? Now, it's all very well to take this great big response, like lock everyone down when there's a couple of cases. But is it a proportionate response if there's 3 cases in the city, and this happened during the Valentine's Day lockdown, if there's a few cases in the city, to lock down everyone in Wodonga? I mean, who can honestly argue that's a proportionate response? And under the emergency powers, if it's not a proportionate response, it's not legal. I mean, and we're not allowed to see any of this stuff. This is exactly why my colleague Tim Quilty from the Liberal Democrats has introduced a private members bill to try and pull back on and provide some safeguards on these emergency powers, because there's really no downside for them for this. Because if someone actually has the money and resources to take it to court and they find that it really wasn't legal, well, there's no real consequences. They might have to cancel that order or whatever. So what we're proposing to do is, if there is something that's found to be unlawful, then make it a criminal offence for the person that signed the order.
Well, that's actually a very good point. I'm going to follow that with interest. David Limbrick, you are a voice for freedom in the Victorian Parliament, and we need more of that. So thanks for your time tonight. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Cory.